can't read that. Alame, yes, son has. Legacy speaks for him, says Governor Dewey. Can find that on page 13. Besides that, we have again IPOP grounds Imo bank shut, shops closed students stranded. Can find that on page 5. And on to NSAS. Lagos police says it will use legitimate means to suppress planned protests. Can find that on page 6. And lastly, Southern PDP governors, leaders meet in Benin to share NWC posts. Can find that on page 6. And that will be all for Nigerian pilots.
And on the New Telegraph, the major headline here says, tension as youth plan mega anniversary. Says, armored tanks, policemen deployed to Lekki Toll Plaza. Police across Nigeria to join ranks. CP area commanders, DPOs, squadron commanders on red alert. That can be found on page 2 of the New Telegraph. And PDP may shift October 30 convention as micro-zoning delays sale of forms. Southeast may go for national secretary. That is also on page 2. And exchange rate artificially low, says Osibajo, asks CBN to bow to market forces, says insecurity. Buhari orders Defense Ministry to start production of weapons, and this can be found on page 3. Imports. Federal government grants 779.7 billion naira duty waivers in 1 year, says process abused by top officials. That can be found on page 3. Southeast NAS caucus seeking political solution to Kanu's release, says Ekwe Madu. That can be found on page 2. Court to hear ex-Senate President Saraki's suit against EFCC EFCC November 2022. That can be found on page 7 and page 8. 2022 budget. Economists faults 10.13 trillion naira revenue forecast. That can be found on page 18. Obi, old FG liable for security failures in Anambra. That can be found on page 7. And lastly, artificial sweeteners could make you hungrier. That can be found on page 8.
Okay. Okay, on Daily Trust, on the front page of the newspaper, Minister sack looms as Buhari supervises appraisal. On the right-hand side of the newspaper, anti-open grazing is senseless to enact unenforceable law, Obaseki. You can see that on page 7 of the newspaper. Further devaluation will worsen poverty, unemployment, expert counters, says Osibajo. You will see that on page 11 of the newspaper. President in race against time, as permanent secretary. You can see that on page 6. 2023 attempt to cut shrift between Tinubu Osibajo will fall presidency, page 32 of the newspaper. After 20 million ransom, Bungudu Emir still in captivity. You can see that on page 18 of the newspaper. Constituents tackle Gbajabiamila over delay in declaring late Plateau Rev'd seats vacant. You can see that on page 32 of the newspaper. 1.3 million Nigerian girls drop out of schools annually. UNICEF. You can also see that on the newspaper. School children still in captivity. Federal government college, Benin, Yankiri, students still in captivity. That's all.
All right, moving on to daily assets, right at the top of the daily asset. Low-income country debts rise to $860 billion in 2022, says World Bank. And you can get the full details on page 2 of the daily asset. As Southeast Bishops says lack of equity, fairness, fueling separatist agitation. And right under that, Abia governor urges federal government to negotiate with Kanu IPOB. Another writer says we are sitting on keg of gunpowder. Declare state of emergency in Nigeria before Anambra, Obi tells federal government. You can get the full details on page 2 of the Daily Asset Papers as Nigerian governors orders appointees seeking party post contest to resign. You can get the full details on page 30 of the Daily Asset as Buhari promises to complete second Niger Bridge, Lagos-Ibadan Expressway before 2023. Sounds like a good news. Can get the full details on page 4 of the Daily Asset Papers as Abuja court orders EFCC to remove the per se from watch list. You can get the full details on page 2 of the Daily Asset Papers. Lalong swears in 17 council chairmen warns against reckless spending. You can get the full details on page 4 of the Daily Asset Papers as Gombe approves appointment of 102 new directors. You can also get the full details on the inside of the Daily Asset Papers. Katsina NCS intercepts vehicles supplying fuel to bandits. You can get the full story on page 4 of the Daily Asset Papers as Zulum receives women, children, escapees from Boko Haram bondage. You can get it on page 6 of the Daily Asset Papers.
And then in Nigerian Tribune, on the top of the newspaper, why I ordered Ndubisi Kanu's corpse not to be released for burial. George, you can see that on page 4. The Pandora documents confiscate my property if $500 million is traced to me. That's his Obi. You can also find that on page 1. Or your APC members divided over zoning formula may reconsider Alawa Kala Council recommendation. You can see that on page 22. And then at the bottom of the newspaper, Naira exchange rate artificially low, Osibajo. You can find that on page 2. Says CBN competing with MDAs in fiscal terms. Buhari okays 13.3 billion naira to take off of community policing and directs military to establish complex for local arms production. International Girl Child Day. Kano, Bauchi governors vacate seats for 14-year-olds. You can see that on page 3. Nigeria's economic resurgence. Learning from the African experience. Akiumi Adeshino, you can see that on page 7. Commercial bus runs over 3 school children of the same family in Osun. You can see that in page 28. Suspect cultists kill prophet father in Akwa Ibom. You can see that in page 28. And police warn against NSAS commemoration protest in Lagos and in Osun. You can see that in page 28.
All right, to wrap up, let's quickly take national economy as right at the top of national economy papers. Customs says ban on importation of rice, boosting local production. And boldly written on national front page of national economy, Nigeria wastes 2,350 megawatts of electricity daily to gas flaring. We have a very short story about that at the front page of the national economy, and the continuation is on page 4 of the national economy. Nigeria may lose category 1 status over NG Eagle certification. Can get the full details on page 8 of the national economy. That'll be all for today on Newspaper Review here on Lagoon Radio. Do well to follow us on all our social media platforms: Facebook, Lagoon Radio Nigeria, Twitter and Instagram at Lagoonradio.Ng, and for more news updates, Lagoon.News. Do connect with us same time tomorrow for a fresh newspaper review. My name is Simidele Oke and
Samuel Olaleton.
Osakwe Okpeyemi.
Haduruja Covenant.
Sorry.
It's a bye from us to you. Do have a pleasant day.